our second episode, and the Allegory. Hi! Today I'll be talking about one of the most famous images in all of philosophy, the Allegory of Decay. But in order to talk about it, I have to go a bit into past, to around 400 BC and the city of Athens. It was here that a man named Socrates lived. Now this was a guy who was not particularly fond of personal hygiene, or work, or writing because he believed that weakens our memory. Pythia, then the Oracle of Delphi, who spent most of her time breathing in poisonous fumes and then telling the future, said that Socrates was the wisest man in all of Greece. Now to be fair, this was probably true. It was Socrates who shaped Western philosophy into what it is today. You see, before Socrates, philosophers spent most of their time thinking about what the world around them was made of. It was Socrates who shifted the focus of philosophy on the human soul and existence. Socrates spent most of his time in the Athenian Agora, just talking to anyone who wanted to talk to him, eavesdropping on random conversations, and just being a general nuisance. Not really many people wanted to talk to Socrates, mainly because his main pastime was to just prove people that they didn't know anything. Needless to say, he wasn't the citizen of the year in Athena. Now to make matters worse, Socrates was usually trailed by a cohort of young men who just snickered in the background while Socrates made fools of those people. But to be fair, and don't get me wrong, Socrates was not mean or rude. He just generally believed that people can achieve true wisdom only if they admit that they don't know anything. But let's be fair and look at Socrates from the Athenian perspective. Many of them just saw a smelly old man gallivanting around the city with a bunch of young men, just making fools of poor citizens. So it was only a matter of time till they sent him to court. He was accused of leading astray the youth of Athens and also being an atheist because he said he had his own demon protector. The trial didn't go very well. Socrates was found guilty. Now there was a custom in ancient Athens where both the prosecutor and the convicted proposed a punishment. The prosecutor went straight in and said, "Death punishment," and then they asked Socrates what the punishment should be. Now at this point, I have to make this clear. Normal convictees would bring their family and their children to beg for mercy, and what did Socrates do? He proposed they give him free food and drink for the rest of his life. So the trial went something like this. So who votes for the death sentence, say aye.
Aye!
Didn't see that coming, did you? But then when asked who wants to perform the death sentence, no one really did. So they made him do it himself. Socrates had to drink hemlock, and he slowly died. I have to make a side note here. Socrates was offered an escape. His friends bribed the guards, but he refused to go. I won't tell you why, just read the book, okay? So you may ask, and rightly so, which book? Socrates disliked writing and he never wrote anything. But do you remember that cohort of young men? Well, they liked writing. One guy in particular. There was a guy called Plato. Now Plato was originally called Aristocles, but his wrestling coach gave him the nickname Plato, which means broad. Some say it was because of his broad shoulders. Some say it's because of his broad forehead. So Plato was the #1 fan of Socrates, so much so in fact that he used him as the main character in all his later works, which came to be called Socratic Dialogues. In these works, Socrates is the hero philosopher who comes to save the day, says something wise, and well, continues doing what he once did in the Agora. In the Republic, Socrates talks to Glaucon, who's Plato's older brother, and the Allegory of Decay is set in an educational context, so think of it that way. Moreover, as Socrates quotes, our nature in its education and our own education. Now, one of the most famous dialogues is the Republic, and it is here that we see the Allegory of the Cave in Book 7. The allegory starts with a cave, believe it or not. It's a dark underground cave where people are bound by their feet and their hands, and their heads are also fixed to only see one spot on the wall in front of them. Now, behind their backs is a great fire burning, and in between the fire and the prisoners is a raised walkway. On that walkway, puppeteers carry various items which cast shadows on the wall in front of the prisoners. The prisoners also hear echoes, and their main pastime is to guess what the shadow is, what's his name or its name. So, for example, imagine a statue of a cat, and then the shadow of the cat on the wall, which the prisoners imagine is perhaps their pet or some cat that they have seen before. They spend their whole life imprisoned in this cave, never really seeing anything else. Now Socrates says, imagine we free one of these prisoners and we force them to look at the fire. We'd have to force them because they don't want to look at it. Their whole life was that wall and they cannot imagine reality. You would also have to bring them outside on the surface using force. When there, the prisoners would first have to look at the shadows and reflections in water because their eyes are used to it. Only then could they perhaps look at trees, forests, mountains, and then eventually even at the sun, which for Socrates is a symbol of all good. I imagine it goes something like this. But an educator is not supposed to stay on the surface. He should go back into the cave and free more people. But there's danger, because these people in the cave wouldn't want to listen to him. The newly freed educator would not see the shadows as he used to, and they would think of him as a fool, a man who is just trying to make chaos. And Socrates suggests that they would probably kill him. Does that sound familiar? The brain in a what is the modern interpretation of the Allegory of the Cave. It's an element in a philosophical thought experiment where someone or something has taken your brain and put it in a container, linked it to a computer who or which simulates real life. You know, a little-known, really low-budget movie was made about it. Not really. It's called The Matrix. So, that's all from me today. I hope I told you something new. Tune in next week to a new episode of What I Learned, and maybe even apply to make your own. If you have any questions, just leave it in the comment section below, and I'll get back to you as soon as possible. Thank you very much for your attention, and till I see you again, examine your life, because an unexamined life is just not worth the living.